Okay, so you should have this paper in front of you, which you should be able to pick up from the substitute. And what we have here in all three cases is two triangles, but the triangles are overlapping. When they're overlapping in certain ways, some of the parts are congruent because it's the same part in both triangles. We call it the common part. For example, if you look at the first triangle here, we have, or the first pair of triangles, we have two triangles. We have one right here, triangle ABC, and then we have another triangle, and it's kind of overlapping with it, triangle BCD. Now, these two triangles have some part that is the same in both of them. And you may be able to tell easily and maybe not, but it's a lot easier if you actually take the triangles and pull them apart. You'll have to be able to do this in your head or actually physically draw them to understand this. But if we take these two triangles and separate them, we can see that we have two separate triangles and they have one thing in common. They have a common side. Side BC in the triangle over here is the same as side BC in the triangle down here. So for these problems, we can say that the segment BC in the first triangle is congruent to segment BC in the second triangle by the reflexive property, because it's the same thing. So the question you have to answer is, what is the common part to these two triangles? And it's segment BC by the reflexive property. That would be congruent. So this is all we have to do for the problem, is identify the common side and the reason it's common. And for all these, it's reflexive property because we're going to have the same tube, same bit in both the triangles. So we're just going to write BC is congruent to BC by the reflexive property. So take a second, pause the video, and see if you can identify what is the common or shared part in problem numbers 2 and 3. In problem number 2, if you separate our two triangles, you can see we have two totally separate triangles, but what was the same before we separated them? If we put them back together, what is the same for both of these triangles? And it's this angle up here on the top. So separately, we would say in the two triangles, angle B is congruent to angle B, and that would be, again, by the reflexive property. And that's it. That's your answer for the second problem. If we look at the third problem, again, what do these two triangles have in common before you separate them? Well, if you actually pull them apart, what we see is just like the first problem, they are sharing this side. Side GL is the same in both of them. Again, it's by the reflexive property. So if we were to write that, if that were to show up in a proof, we could say segment GL is congruent to segment GL by the reflexive property. In the problem on the bottom, we're doing a proof involving overlapping triangles. When we do this, when we mark the given, you're probably better off taking a moment and drawing two separate triangles. If you can do that, it can make the problem much, much easier to do. So what you want to do is you want to think of this not as one big weird looking shape, because when you start marking the given information, MN congruent to ML, you put a mark in this side, and you may not be sure which thing you have just marked congruent. So instead, what you want to do is take the triangles and separate them. Here's one of them, and here's the other. And then if we mark these separately, it can be pretty easy. The one thing you got to remember is what was the same before we separated them. What did these both have in common? It was angle M. And in the two triangles, angle M is going to be congruent to angle M by the reflexive property. Then if we start taking the given information, this becomes a very easy problem. It says MN is congruent to ML, so that's this segment is congruent to this segment. And JM is congruent to KM, so this side is congruent to this side. We should easily be able to tell that the two triangles are congruent by side angle side. Take a moment, pause the video, see if you can write out the proof for this. Now the first two lines of this proof are exactly what they would be in any other proof. We list the given information. The only thing new here is this next step. We've marked angle M congruent in both the triangles. So what's the reason for that going to be? And again, this is the only new part to this proof, was that angle M was the same in both the triangles. So angle M is congruent to angle M by the reflexive property. And once again, the rest of the proof is really simple. These two triangles are congruent by side angle side. And again, the only thing that's new here is that there was a shared angle that was congruent by the reflexive property.